Listen to me now and believe me later. Today, I'm not here to whisper. I'm here to fire you up, to shock your system, to pump your spirit like muscle in the gym. Because we are going to talk about power, co-Eurasia, about that one bold move from India that stood like a mountain, while the mighty United States, yes, the so-called superpower, was left humiliated. This is about strength, discipline, the guts to stand tall when the world tells you to bow down. Are you ready? Then let's see ours the weakness, let's smash the fear, and let's dive in. In 1998, world witnessed something that no one expected, something that even the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world, the CIA, the pride of the United States, failed to predict. India, a nation that many in the West underestimated, carried out a series of nuclear tests under the codename Operation Shakti. These were not ordinary tests. These were thunderbolts, explosions of courage and defiance that shook the desert sands of Pokhran and echoed across the globe. What made this move so legendary was not just the technical brilliance or the scientific mastery, the sheer audacity to do it right under the nose of the United States, the country that had sworn to prevent it, the country that thought it controlled the world stage. Imagine this: the CIA, with its satellites, its analysts, its high-tech gadgets, failed to detect what India's scientists and leaders had hidden with discipline, secrecy, and national unity. The United States was humiliated, not just because India had tested nuclear weapons, but because it had been outsmarted. Outsmarted not by some other superpower, not by Russia, not by China, by a country that was still seen as developing, still dismissed by many as struggling. That humiliation was a message, a roar, a declaration that India was no longer going to play by rules set in Washington. This bold move redefined the balance of power. It told the world that strength is not about how many dollars you print or how many aircraft carriers you park in the ocean. Strength is about the courage to make your move when the world least expects it. It is about the discipline to prepare in silence and then strike like thunder. For the United States, it was a slap, a shock, a reminder that no matter how mighty you think you are, arrogance blinds you. For India, it was the opposite. It was the unveiling of self-belief. Proof that even the so-called impossible could be achieved with focus and determination. And that is what makes this event a source of pure motivation, because it shows that the giant can fall asleep, the underdog can rise and roar. It shows that intelligence, when sharpened with discipline, can humiliate brute power. It shows that boldness, when backed by preparation, can rewrite history. India's nuclear test in 1998 was not just about weapons, it was about self-respect, about refusing to be bullied, about telling the world, we will decide our destiny, not you. It was about breaking chains, about building muscles of independence, about flexing in the face of those who wanted you weak. And in that moment, India humiliated the United States not with violence, not with threats, but with the simple, powerful act of being unafraid. When India detonated its nuclear devices in Pokhran, it wasn't just the shockwaves in the desert that mattered. It was the earthquake it created inside the CIA headquarters in Langley. The agency that prided itself on seeing everything, on knowing everything, had been caught sleeping. For years, the United States had been watching India with satellites, monitoring every move, analyzing every construction, every convoy. They believed they had India under their watchful eye, that nothing could happen without them knowing. And yet, India pulled off the unimaginable. Multiple nuclear tests executed flawlessly, without the CIA having the faintest idea until after the mushroom clouds had already risen. This failure was not just a minor slip, it was a humiliation of epic proportions. The CIA, often portrayed as the world's sharpest intelligence machine, was suddenly mocked by its own politicians, its own media, its own citizens. The question echoed everywhere: how could a developing nation outwit the most advanced spy network on Earth? The answer was simple but powerful: discipline, secrecy, and unity. India's scientists worked in silence, disguising their movements, even using decoy vehicles to fool the satellites, and timing their activities with the patience of hunters stalking their prey. Every action was calculated, every risk measured, and the entire mission operated like a machine fueled by patriotism. The brilliance of this deception became a lesson in itself. When you combine brains with courage, no mountain is too high to climb, no enemy too powerful to outsmart. For the CIA, this was a nightmare because their reputation was built on being untouchable, unbeatable. Suddenly, they were exposed, stripped of their aura, standing embarrassed before the world. American newspapers called it the biggest intelligence failure since Pearl Harbor, and that label stung because it meant history had repeated itself. India had made the mighty intelligence agency look like amateurs, and that humiliation was more powerful than any sanction or threat America could throw back. It wasn't just about technology, it was about mindset. The CIA underestimated India because of arrogance, because of the belief that only great powers could play the great game. They saw India as a follower, not a leader, and that miscalculation cost them dearly. This humiliation sent ripples across the globe. Countries that once bowed to U.S. pressure began to rethink their positions, realizing that even the giant could be tricked, even the master could be fooled. For India, it was a proud reminder that the underdog has weapons far deadlier than size or wealth. It has the element of surprise, the sharpness of wit, and the courage to take risks when no one else dares. The CIA's failure in 1998 was not just an intelligence breakdown, it was a story of how arrogance blinds vision, how overconfidence destroys awareness, and how silence can be the greatest weapon against noise. The dust settled after India's nuclear tests. The United States reacted with fury, imposing heavy sanctions, cutting off aid, freezing cooperation, and trying to corner India diplomatically. The message was clear: America wanted to punish India, to make it bend, to make it regret daring to challenge the global order. But instead of crumbling under the weight of these sanctions, India stood firm. Instead of bowing its head, India lifted its chin higher. What shocked the world was not just the bold act of testing nuclear weapons, but the way India responded to the storm that followed. The United States expected economic pain to bring India to its knees, but India absorbed the pressure like a seasoned fighter taking blows in the ring. It didn't stagger, it didn't retreat. It grew stronger. The sanctions, meant to humiliate, became a badge of pride, proof that India had rattled the most powerful nation on earth. India had entered the nuclear club on its own terms, not through permission, not through approval, but through courage and defiance. This resilience became a turning point. It showed that the strength of a nation is not measured by how many allies it has or how much aid it receives, by the willpower to endure hardship without losing direction. India's leaders and scientists displayed a mindset of steel. They knew sacrifices would come. They also knew that true independence comes at a price. The economy faced challenges, the global markets looked on with doubt, but India did not beg, did not plead, did not reverse its decision. The sanctions that were supposed to isolate India actually united it from within. Citizens felt pride, leaders gained confidence, and the world was forced to acknowledge that here was a country that would not be bullied. America had underestimated the psychological impact of its own actions. Instead of breaking India's spirit, the sanctions hardened it. Instead of silencing India, they gave it a louder voice. The very attempt to weaken India ended up strengthening its resolve. This is the kind of resilience that separates the bold from the timid, the lions from the sheep, because resilience is not just about surviving pressure, it is about transforming pressure into fuel, about using adversity as training weight to build muscle. India turned sanctions into resistance training, each obstacle becoming an opportunity to prove that no external force could dictate its destiny. What was meant to be humiliation for India turned into humiliation for the United States because the world saw that the sanctions failed. They saw that the mighty America could not bend a determined India. This defiance sent a message louder than any speech, louder than any negotiation. Resilience is the ultimate weapon, and in 1998, India wielded that weapon like a champion. Success of India's nuclear tests in 1998 was not only about explosions in the desert, but about the invisible preparation that made those explosions possible. The lesson of preparation and secrecy was at the very heart of India's triumph. For years, Indian scientists, military planners, and political leaders worked in the shadows, building plans brick by brick, making sure every detail was accounted for, every weakness covered, every risk minimized. This was not an operation that came alive overnight. It was decades of patience, persistence, and quiet determination. What made it remarkable was how India managed to hide its moves from the most watchful eyes in the world. The United States had satellites scanning every inch of Pokhran, analysts monitoring every movement. Yet India deceived them with discipline. Scientists traveled under fake names, used disguises, and blended into civilian life. Equipment was moved at night, convoys were disguised as routine army drills, and even the local population was kept unaware of the true scale of what was happening. Secrecy was not just a tactic, it was a weapon. Without secrecy, the CIA would have intercepted, the United States would have pressured, and the tests would have been blocked. But preparation and secrecy together created a shield stronger than any defense system. Discipline with which India planned every detail reflected the power of strategy. Too often, people think victory comes from sudden inspiration. The truth is that victory comes from preparation so complete that it leaves no room for failure. Every scientist working on Operation Shakti carried the weight of national pride on their shoulders, yet they moved in silence, never leaking, never boasting, never seeking attention. This kind of preparation requires humility, patience, and collective unity. The lesson here is timeless. You don't announce your moves. You don't scream your goals to the world. You prepare in silence. And when the time is right, you strike with thunder. Pokhran tests showed that preparation is the ultimate equalizer. India did not have the same resources as the United States. It did not have the same technology or budgets, but it had discipline. That discipline turned the impossible into reality. Preparation means outthinking the opponent, anticipating their every move before they even make it. Secrecy means denying them the chance to counter you, making your actions unstoppable because no one saw them coming. Together, they form the foundation of true strength. What humiliated the United States was not just that India tested nuclear weapons, that it had done so right under their watch, in full daylight, in front of their satellites, and yet they failed to see it. That is the victory of preparation. That is the power of secrecy. India proved that silence can be louder than noise, that patience can be stronger than aggression, and that when preparation is complete, the world's most powerful can still be caught by surprise. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to act in spite of fear, and India's nuclear tests in 1998 were a living example of this truth. The stakes could not have been higher. India knew that by conducting these tests, it would anger the United States, invite sanctions, face global criticism, and possibly even isolation from powerful nations. The risks were enormous, but courage is about looking at those risks and saying, "We will still move forward." This was not reckless bravery. It was calculated courage rooted in the belief that without bold action, India would remain in the shadows, forever dependent on the goodwill of others. At that moment, India's leaders and scientists understood that history does not reward the hesitant, it rewards the daring. When you look back, you see that it was not just nuclear devices that were tested in Pokhran. It was the courage of a nation being tested. Every step of the process demanded boldness, from defying American warnings to ignoring pressure from allies, from risking sanctions to facing internal doubts. Courage reshapes destiny because it changes the way the world perceives you and the way you perceive yourself. Before 1998, India was often seen as a nation that talked about potential but rarely converted into decisive action. After 1998, that perception was shattered. The world now had to recognize India as a nation that could take destiny into its own hands, even when the consequences were daunting. This is the transformative power of courage. It forces respect, even from those who oppose you. The United States may have tried to humiliate India with sanctions, but deep down, even they understood that it takes extraordinary courage to defy a superpower and succeed. Once courage is displayed on the world stage, it cannot be taken back, it cannot be erased, it becomes a permanent part of identity. For India, this courage planted the seeds of self-belief in future generations, teaching them that fear of consequences is never greater than the reward of freedom. In life, as in geopolitics, destiny does not bend to the timid, it bends to the brave. India's courage in 1998 demonstrated that you cannot wait for permission to rise. You cannot wait for approval to assert yourself. You must claim your place with boldness, no matter the resistance. Courage is contagious. It spreads like fire. When a nation shows courage, its people begin to live differently, they dream bigger, they stand taller, they refuse to be intimidated. India's act of defiance was a lesson to the entire world that the bold shape their own path, while the fearful live on paths carved by others. It showed that the power of courage goes beyond weapons, beyond sanctions, beyond politics. It transforms identity, it transforms destiny. When India carried out its nuclear tests, the humiliation of the United States was clear, but what mattered more was how that humiliation translated into respect for India. This is a crucial lesson. When you stand up for yourself, you don't just embarrass the oppressor, you elevate yourself in the eyes of the world. Before 1998, India's position in global politics was often passive, shaped more by how others viewed it than by how it viewed itself. But when India made its bold move, it forced even its critics to take notice. Nations that once doubted India's resolve suddenly realized that this was not a country to be ignored, not a nation to be pushed around. Respect was not begged for, it was earned through action. By turning the tables, India showed that humiliation of one side naturally becomes recognition for the other. The stronger the shock, the louder the respect that follows. America had built its image as the master of global order, the enforcer of rules, the gatekeeper of nuclear power. When India defied that image, created a ripple effect that weakened America's aura while strengthening its own. For India, this was not about mocking the U.S., it was about standing tall enough that the world saw it differently. Respect does not come from asking politely, it comes from showing strength, from proving that you will not bend under pressure. After the Pokhran tests, even nations that had condemned India found themselves acknowledging its determination. Behind closed doors, conversations changed. The same Western leaders who once dismissed India began considering partnerships, because respect is the currency of power, and India had just raised its value. This transformation was not immediate in terms of policy, but it was immediate in terms of perception. A nation that humiliates a superpower by outsmarting it cannot be ignored. That moment taught the world that India was willing to take risks, willing to challenge authority, willing to define its own course. Respect is built on fearlessness, and India had shown it in abundance. The sanctions imposed by America and its allies did not weaken this respect, they amplified it. The tougher the punishment, greater the admiration when India did not bend. Other nations watched closely, and many drew inspiration from the defiance. They realized that the superpower could be resisted. The narrative of invincibility was not absolute. India's resilience turned humiliation into respect, not only in the eyes of the world, but also in the hearts of its own people. Citizens began to believe in the power of their country like never before, because respect from the outside world always fuels pride from within. This is the essence of transformation. You convert an adversary's attempt to break you into a reason for others to admire you. India's nuclear test became more than a scientific achievement. They became a psychological victory, a moment when respect was earned through strength and dignity replaced doubt. The power of national will is often underestimated, yet it is the most decisive factor in shaping history. India's nuclear tests in 1998 were not just about technology, not just about politics, but about the collective will of a nation refusing to be dictated to by external powers. The United States had warned, threatened, and pressured India for years, trying to keep it from crossing the nuclear line. But when the time came, India proved that national will is stronger than external pressure, stronger than sanctions, stronger than the disapproval of so-called world leaders. National will is born when a people decide that enough is enough, that they will chart their own destiny regardless of the consequences. This is what India displayed at Pokhran. It was not just the scientists in the desert who made it possible. It was the alignment of leadership, vision, and the determination of an entire country that carried the mission forward. External pressure is only effective when a nation doubts itself, but when the will is firm, no outside force can bend it. India showed that to the world in dramatic fashion. Every step of Operation Shakti was a testament to this willpower. Leaders refused to be intimidated by threats of economic collapse. Scientists refused to let fear paralyze innovation, and the people refused to see themselves as weak or dependent. National will becomes unstoppable when it unites government, military, and citizen under one shared purpose. That unity is what turned the dream of nuclear capability into reality. The United States underestimated the strength of this will, assuming India could be coerced by sanctions or warnings. But willpower cannot be measured in dollars, it cannot be spied on by satellites, it cannot be bought or broken by external force. It is invisible but undeniable, and when it manifests, it changes the course of nations. India's act in 1998 proved that a nation's destiny is not controlled by those who claim to be powerful, by those who have the courage to exercise their will. The bold move humiliated the United States precisely because it exposed the limits of pressure. For years, America had projected itself as the controller of outcomes, yet here was India proving that true power lies in self-belief and determination. When a nation decides that its survival, its dignity, and its sovereignty are non-negotiable, then no amount of external interference can hold it back. The lesson of national will is that strength flows from within, not from outside approval. India's tests were a roar to the world, a roar that said, we will not wait for permission, we will not bow to threats, we will not let others decide our place. National will turns weakness into strength, turns pressure into fuel, it turns doubt into defiance. And in 1998, India demonstrated that this force is more powerful than any weapon, more enduring than any alliance, and more unshakable than any external pressure. The nuclear tests of 1998 did not just shake the ground in Pokhran, they shook the mindset of an entire nation. For decades, India had been seen as a cautious player. Country weighed down by poverty, bureaucracy, and a dependency on foreign powers for recognition. The world often dismissed India as a land of potential, not a power. The moment those nuclear devices detonated, everything changed. India's self-image transformed overnight. What had once been a nation hesitant to claim its place on the global stage now walked with confidence, knowing it had asserted sovereignty in the boldest way possible. This was not just about weapons, it was about identity. It was about saying, we are not afraid, we are not dependent. We are not waiting for anyone's approval. That confidence radiated into every sphere: politics, diplomacy, economics, and even the psychology of the people. Suddenly, the youth of India felt they belonged to a nation that could stand tall among giants. The leaders, once forced into defensive postures in international forums, now spoke with the authority of equals. Media reflected it, the public absorbed it, and the world witnessed it. Global confidence comes not from slogans but from action, and India's action in 1998 gave it credibility that speeches never could. Nations that once pressured India now sought dialogue. Countries that once dismissed India as a weak player began recalculating their strategies, realizing they could not afford to ignore a nation that had just defied the United States and still stood unshaken. Confidence became contagious. Scientists believed in their abilities more. The military felt prouder of its mission, and the ordinary citizen felt a sense of dignity in belonging to a nation that had announced itself to the world without fear. This bold move created a psychological shift where India no longer looked at itself from the lens of limitation, but from the perspective of power. Confidence is like oxygen. It fuels ambition, it sharpens vision, drives performance. After Pokhran, India began carrying itself differently in negotiations, in trade discussions, in regional diplomacy. The aura of hesitation was replaced with the aura of strength. Even those who criticized the tests could not deny the transformation. India had shown that when you take a stand for yourself, the world respects you, even if they pretend to resist. And respect, once gained, amplifies confidence. For decades, India had been told to wait, to follow rules written by others, to remain within boundaries defined by the West. But in 1998, that script was torn apart. From that day forward, India's global confidence was no longer a dream. It was a reality forged in fire, a reality the world could not ignore. The boldness of action had given birth to boldness of identity, and that identity became the foundation for a stronger future.